as brewers, we are not making the beer. We are yeast farmers. If the yeast is happy, you will have a good beer. If the yeast is angry or stressed, you will have some kind of beer.
The food job that we're exploring today is brewer.
Chemistry is like the backbone of brewing.
The professional behind that job is Santiago Ampudia Vasquez, a brewer at Blackburn Brewery and assistant professor at Niagara College.
You can make batches between 3,600 to 120 hectoliters of beer. That's a lot.
In this episode, we'll learn about what a brewer does at an independent brewery.
80% of the time, sometimes in brewing is cleaning, so cleaning tanks.
The skills that are needed to be an effective brewer.
Person that follows procedures is really important. So don't rely on your memory. Write SOPs, write your procedures.
And of course, we'll be talking about the science behind the brew making process.
And then you will use the enzymes that are within the grain to start breaking down the long chain of starches into small units of sugar.
Thank you to Coors Now for sponsoring this podcast episode.
Okay, so my typical day is around 8:30. So here I'm part of the brewing team. We are 3 brewers, 1 head brewer and 2 brewers. The other brewer is especially more responsible of the brewing part. I'm more into filtration and the RTDs development. So any other recipe but beer, it's on my hand. And honestly, during the day is like a lot of movement. 80% of the time, sometimes in brewing is cleaning. So cleaning tanks, checking that everything is nice and clean for the product to be in. So a lot of take care of the tanks. And then it's just like any other lab, but in a big scale. So mixing ingredients, tasting here and there, checking your numbers, checking that the ABV is right. If you add too much alcohol or too much water, just correct it. You don't have to start over. Just try to dial the ingredients in, and then if something goes like a little lower or a little higher, we will have a gap for our parameters that is allowed by the law. Filtering is part of the job too. So a lot of cleaning the beer from the fermenter into the bright tanks before going into cans. Using a centrifuge, you have a big centrifuge here. It's I will say the standard in the industry right now, and we can have from a hazy IPA to a really nice, clean and crisp lager or pilsner. So you have that range. Blackburn Brewhouse, it's I think it's a big system for what we have around here in the area in Niagara. We have a brew house that is about 4,000 liters brew house. So you can make batches between 3,600 to 120 hectoliters of beer. When you are doing like 1,200 liters of beer, that's a lot. So you need to do it in 3 parts. But usually, if you are doing just one day, it will be around 3,500. So in that range of number, usually what we use instead of thousands of liters is hectoliters. So from 35 to 120 hectoliters is what we usually brew in our tanks. We have more lagers and pilsner as part of our portfolio, and then a couple of IPA. But we are trying to think in what other side we can get into it. We are part of the companies that do beers for other clients. So we do a lot of contract with clients around Ontario, and we have a big client that is Omnipolo, a brewery from Netherlands. So that's really cool to have part of the Europe beers in here. So we for Omnipolo we have done a couple of beers. One that is really popular and is catchy for the eye is the Zodiac. It's a hazy IPA and the can is full black, like pitch black. But you will have some aliens and planets in bright green, so it's pretty shine on the shelf.
Although I feel that I do want to dive into more about what you do as a job, I realize that we should maybe take it back. I know that you already mentioned filtration, and I'm thinking if we're going to understand what you do for a job, I feel like we almost need to understand the beer making process because I guess I was under the impression that you could just take city water and use it directly, but it's sounding like that's not actually the case. So, maybe just generally talk about what the beer making process is like.
Sure. So the general process or any beer, you will have four basic ingredients: water, malt, hops, and yeast. That's it. But we want to understand that as brewers, we are not making the beer. We are yeast farmers. So we are taking care of the yeast because the yeast is the one that is making the beer. So what we have to provide to that particular yeast is good ingredients, good material, and keep the yeast happy. If the yeast is happy, you will have a good beer. If the yeast is angry or stressed, you will have some kind of beer. So uh, think about that. You have your malt, that is your grain. So came from barley, came from oats, from wheat, even corn or rice, depending on the style. You will throw that in a mash tun. So you're pretty much soaked in hot water to extract all the sugar. And then you will use the enzymes that are within the grain to start breaking down the long chain of starches into small units of sugar. That small unit of sugar is easier for the yeast to consume and get energy from it. Then we what have to do is remove that water from that mix, that mash done and into the ladder. So we are transferring the liquid into another vessel. In that vessel, we will do is use the same grains as a filter. So we will recirculate the water through that bed, and then your wort, that is the liquid with sugars, will turn into a bright, shiny wort. That wort goes into a third tank, that is our boiler. Then we boil the wort because we want to have that sterilized. So up to 92 degrees usually, and you start getting your boil. You can add hops in that boiling tank to get that bitterness, that particular bitterness of our beers. And that has another transformation process. We are extracting alpha acids from the hops, and those alpha acids will preserve the beer. So that's why some beers are not pasteurized, because the hops will inhibit any bacterial activity and any secondary fermentation from the yeast when you have your fresh wine from the tap. And after that boiling process and the hop addition, we transfer that into another vessel that will be our whirlpool. The whirlpool is just doing using centrifuge forces to mix and cool down that wort before going into the fermenter. Um, so from 92, we will go down to around 60 to 70 degrees, and then we will cool down even further through the heat exchanger into the fermenter. In that process, we will use glycol to cool down, and we will go down from 60 to down to 12, or between 12 and 24, depending on the yeast strain, into your fermenter. Once you have your wort in the fermenter, then the yeast is happening. So we can pitch the yeast in directly into the fermenter after you are throwing the wort in. And it's something that is really, really important. And we have to oxygenate the wort because the yeast will suffer two fermentation well, no, we will have two respiration processes from the yeast. The first one is aerobic, as any other living being. So the yeast will take oxygen from the wort and will start producing a lot of energy units. So ATP and NADH, that's regular energy unit for any living cell, and that will help the yeast to grow, like multiply. Instead of being a couple of cells, we will have millions of cells within the wort getting ready to eat the sugars that are in the wort. After that exponential growth that we have in the first 24 to 48 hours, uh, the fermentation will happen. That is an anaerobic pathway where the yeast will consume the sugars and produce CO2 and ethanol. And what we want in our beer, have enough ethanol and enough carbonation to have a really nice and carbonated beverage. The the fermentation process will take between a week and 2 weeks, I will say, depending on your yeast strain. Like any other living being, it will do the work at their own pace. So we cannot push the yeast to move faster. We can, but that will trigger some off flavors. And after those 2 weeks, let's say the beer is ready, and then is the call from the brewer. You need to check that fermenter every single day, taste if there's any off flavor, if fermentation is going well. We are checking all the time what is the gravity. So specific gravity on your fermenter that is measuring the amount of sugar remaining on your beer. And with that, we can calculate how much alcohol are we getting from that fermentation. When you are happy with that, you want to taste again your beer and check if there's any of flavor. Usually you can have some, let's say, byproducts from fermentation that has not turned completely into ethanol. That is diacetyl and acetaldehyde. So those two can turn into ethanol in a proper process. So if that is happening, you can smell like butterscotch or green apple in that fermenter. And so you want to clean that up. You can raise the temperature of your fermenter so the yeast will be more active, retake those off flavors and transform into ethanol. And then when the beer is clean or has the profile that you want, the filtration process is happening. So in that process, you can do two things. One is use that remaining active yeast to move into another fermenter and keep fermenting and keep working, or you can dump that yeast or discard that yeast that maybe is too old, and the remaining liquid go into a filtration process. Will you remove any remaining debris from that liquid and turn into another tank that will be the final tank before going into cans or kegs?
Wow. I'm just imagining the process like when we're planning on making a beer flavor, like you mentioned in the conversation prior about something like oak flavor, and I guess where I'm going with this is like when in the beer making process are you able to change things? Like I guess you can. So I guess you mentioned that the yeast is doing their job, and so I'm just thinking like um what parts can you change in the beer making process as it's going along? Like when can you change it?
So if we are talking about yeast, depending on the beer that you want to make, let's say let's make a pilsner. So the pilsner is clean. The regular industrial beer that everybody consumes around the world. That yeast needs to produce clean profile. So no extra aromas, no extra esters, just a clean beer. You can taste a little bit of the malt. It's refreshing. It's dry. But then you have some other yeast that are more funky. So let's say you have a bison, Hefeweizen, that is a wheat beer, German style, but that particular yeast will express some esters that when you are drinking, you can smell banana, clove. Some other yeasts are more funky. So, or you are doing an open fermentation like Belgian style. So you will have not just that, but some fruits. And you can get those flavors, whether from the yeast that is expressing this ester in the process of getting amino acids and turning into more energy, or the we think that's like more complicated process to explain, or you can give the yeast the ingredients to transform into flavors. So you can get some flavors from the hops or from the grain. Let's think about, okay, you want to give to your beer more woody, dark, or chocolate flavor. So you need to treat your malt previously and toast it and creating those Maillard reaction, that is the reaction between a sugar and an amino acid. So you will get that brownie color and particular flavor that you can get in bread or when you are cooking in your grill. That nice and glassy brown shade when you are cooking, you can get that color and those flavors into your beer. But if you want to do something else, like, oh, I want to add it like fruits, or I want to add like a particular wood aroma. So one thing is when you are treating with woods, you can treat your malt with that wood smoke. I remember one of my friend did a really nice saison beer, and but she used a cherry smoke malt. So you will have that smoke into your malt that will go into your beer somehow because of this process is really dynamic. But in your fermenter, you can add some flavors. So we have the I have been adding from passion fruit to rose tea. So what I did was that was part of my beers during my years in the college. It was one was passion fruit Vienna lager, so a regular Vienna lager, this kind of copperish lager that is really good. But I want to add it something else. So what I did is take pulp, passion fruit pulp, and throw into the fermenter by the end of fermentation. So those remaining sugars from the fruit won't do more alcohol, but just give flavor to it. And you don't want to overexpress those flavors. So late fermentation, a fixed amount of passion fruit. And when I filtered that, I tried to remove any haziness. So the beer was still like a Vienna, but when you drink it, you can smell the passion fruit and you will have a taste like at the end, an aftertaste of, oh, it's fruity, it's acid, it's well balanced with the beer. And we did that beer specific for a tournament within the college. That was a pairing tournament against the wine student team, and we won. One of the beer was that. Then we do a couple other beers, but that was the beer that I designed and I brew. The other one was my project beer, that is the rose one. So in my country, we are really well known because of the roses. And talking with my wife, it's like I want to share with science and with Canada some of my flavors, but I didn't know how to blend it. So my wife, that is a chemist as well, and she is more like going into cosmetic products. She had her own brand back in Ecuador and worked with the pharma industry. So she's more into quality and she understands better those ingredients. So she throw me that ball like, why do you add roses to a beer? Like, okay, that's a good idea. But if you add rose water, it will taste like perfume. And I don't want that. But if you have the chance to drink a rose tea, the rose tea has the rose fragrance, but it's a little bit acid. So, okay, that makes sense. And I was trying to find out which beer will fit with that. So, a little bit of research, reading, I found a particular German style that is Kolsch. So, the Kolsch beer is brewed exclusively in Cologne, and that's why it's called Kolsch. So even for some German, if they bought a coach outside of Europe or outside of Germany, it's kind of an insult. So I have to be really careful with that. Um, and I when I was reading, okay, the close profile has a little bit of those flowery notes like orange blossom notes and some fruits, and it's fresh and it's crisp. It was summer, so that was a perfect blend. And I mixed it, And even for some Germans, they look my beer looks like a rosé wine. So it was not like a beer; it was looks like a wine. But and they were like, oh no, this is not a beer. Like just try it, and then you let me know. So a couple of Germans were in my project group. They tasted like, oh, it's a Kolsch, but it has that interesting roast notes. I really like it. And the beer was gone in like the event started around 5, and by 7, all the beer was gone.
Yeah, yeah, because like hearing the words beer and rose, they don't sound like they should go in the same sentence. Like they're not two flavors that I would think of putting together. Like they don't sound like they should
Yeah,
come
no,
together. Like
it's like when you're trying pumpkin ale. It's okay, pumpkin. You think about all this mix of spices and sugar sweet, and then beer, how you blend it. But here in Canada, I used to work with O's, and they made one of the most amazing pumpkin ales that I ever tried here in Canada.
this episode is brought to you by Careers Now, your free gateway to exploring and building your career in Ontario's food and beverage manufacturing industry. If you're inspired by Santiago's journey, you should know that there are so many paths into this industry, and Careers Now can help you find yours. They offer free virtual mentorship sessions with industry professionals, job fairs where you can meet with employers, and exclusive training programs that can give you a real edge. Signing up is quick, easy, and completely free. Visit careersnow.ca to create your profile and start exploring today. That's careersnow.ca. From passion to profession, now. Let's get back into the episode with Santiago. I'd love to keep talking about that, but I'm going to bring it backwards and focus on you. Talk about your career. Talk about your food job. I know at the beginning of our conversation, you said that you're more into the filtration side of the job, but you also do a lot of R&D. And I'd like to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty about what that actually means. So, would you be able to talk about your food job? Just get into more about the specifics of your job, because like I think that everyone has this like idolized version of what a brewer is, and that's maybe not what it actually is. So, yeah, maybe just talk a little bit more about the specifics of your job.
As I mentioned at the beginning, like 80% of the time when you are brewing is cleaning and taking care of your yeast. So brewing, if you are brewing, it will take pretty much the whole day. So the day starts around 8 and will finish around 4. And all these processes, checking, taking care of the boil, you need to follow up the way. It's not just like, okay, I will put my greens in, I will add the water and see you at 4. It's like you need to check every other minute to check if, okay, my boiling is going good, my grains are soaked, I'm checking my gravities, I'm moving my liquid out and moving into another tank. So it's a lot of detail that you need to follow, and you need to be really aware what is going on during the whole process. And sometimes you have waiting time. So when you are mashing, usually your waiting time will be at least an hour. When you are boiling, will be an hour and a half, depending on the style. And some process you can do extra stuff. Um, but then there's no much time to be seated or taking breaks, like long breaks. You can do breaks, of course. Everybody needs that. But it's like a lot of physical and mental work all the time. You need to be really focused on what you're doing, taking care of what you're doing to have a good product. And it's like everything is about consistency. Because that's what happened with your product. You want people to come back and ask for that particular beer that you make, but if the next time that they come as different, it's like, oh, I'm not returning. The beer is completely different. I don't like it. You were not consistent. So it started with the water. I didn't mention that, but the water changed with time. Water changed from summer to winter. The water changed from country to country. So every beer has a water profile. So you need to adjust that water, add in salts, add in citric acid, add in some other chemicals to have the right amount of ions and elements that will help the yeast to ferment properly. So, like any other micronutrient for us, zinc, magnesium is really important for the yeast, uh, and they require that to perform best. And some other ions like sodium ions, chloride ions, sulfate ions will help to balance some flavors and will uh, boost some flavors as well. So you want that balance, and every ingredient has their own particularities. Like the malting process is a whole science behind that. So we are taking all those sectors and putting into a recipe.
And what would you say are some of the top skills that someone would need to be successful in your job? Like you mentioned it's physical, but I mean, there has to be some other skills that are really important for your job.
First, I will say you need to be detail oriented. It's really important if you want your things right. Is That's a good skill that you can develop without being into like specifically brewing. But if you want to go into that pathway, it's good to have, and you can develop it. Um, a person that follows procedures is really important. So don't rely on your memory. Write SOPs, write your procedures. So if someone else is coming to help you or you are training someone, it's easier to show them here's what you have to do rather than relying on your memory and maybe, oh, I forget to add this and that. Like, no, you have to follow steps. Um, you need to be passionate about beer for sure, because it requires that extra mile of thinking, okay, I need to try to predict the future, what I will get from these ingredients. But that is part of the fashion that you have to have for science.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. It sounds like it's the type of role where you can really combine science and you can combine creativity, but then it still has that like structure. And that might be something that someone really enjoys if they want to be creative. But like, yeah, I guess it's kind of like cooking where you're able to fix the recipe throughout, but then you still have the structure because like you still need to do, keep the pH proper, make sure that the water is okay, keep like X, Y, and Z in order. And
Yep,
yeah, well,
exactly. Yep, exactly. You mentioned cooking, and yeah, it's pretty much like cooking. I love to cook as well. So you can get those ideas, and I will say like a lot of scientists, a lot of chemists are good at the kitchen because it's like your lab, and you can taste what you are making. In the lab, you cannot taste what you are doing. So yeah, and the brewery is another big lab.
actually, this is a good transition point to talk about your background because I do know that you have a background in chemistry, and I think that it's in nanotech, but I could be wrong. So, how did you find your way into brewing?
Well, chemistry is like the backbone of brewing. So I try to build a talk for my Ecuadorian students or my French students about the science behind beer, and it's all related with chemistry. So for me to have that background was really easy to understand all the science behind brewing because like that's familiar for me. It's like, oh, I understand pH, I understand this, I understand that. And funny enough, I remember I hate food chemistry, but now you are finding me here at Niagara College working with research that is making food and beverage. But I understand that the food chemistry that I was learning, it was more into the backbone of food. So, oh, you need to do ashes, you need to check the nitrogen, you need to check all the elements that are within food. And that is like a long, sometimes boring process. But when you are making recipes for clients, so you are experimenting, you are taking raw material and transforming into product, it's really rewarding because you have the basic ingredients. You have sugar, you have acids, you have this and that and water, and you mix all together. But it's not just mixing, it's like understanding when you have to mix, how you have to mix, what temperature, what pH, what this and that, and then makes sense. It's like all the science behind that makes sense and like click. Nanotech is funny because nanotech is part of. It was like one of my professors um gave us a paper about this new technology. Well, new. And I just get it like, oh, I really like it. And afterwards, I was looking into programs and I found this nanoscience and nanotechnology program in University of Barcelona. It's like, oh, that looks pretty cool. So understanding the nano level of science and understanding how the property change. My research project in my master is completely not related with brewing. It was like more energy harvesting and energy storing. So we were developing a material that will do photoelectrocatalytic process to produce hydrogen, and then we need to store that somewhere. And we were the my part was using regular water, but the final goal was using seawater from Barcelona to produce energy. Uh, and I made great friends from there. Actually, I blend part of that nanotechnology with brewing as well because my friend that developed that beer, the 1566, developed a nanocellulose material to store yeast for ages, so you don't need refrigeration for that. And understanding that and understanding the materials, I think it's just all the mix of knowledge that is helping every day, and you are exposed to other materials, to other techniques, to other equipment that you can put into your future as well. And it's not just the information that you are getting from that is uh, how do I put it? Like the whole experience. So what I will try to do every time that I'm switching fields is like using the previous knowledge and applying to my next field. So I have been applying here all the knowledge from teaching to chemistry to the pharma business and how to deal with people, soft skills that you are developing in the way, and all the that science background that is helping me to understand better how the yeast is working, how the ingredients are working, and how they are blended together. Um, so that's how I see craft brewing. It's not just doing things with your hands, but using the technology to apply new principles.
I like that. I like how there's different types of, there's different kinds of beers, there's different types of sciences, and like it sounds like brewing is something that someone with a science background can go in, and like there's people from all different walks of life. And yeah, it's an interesting role for someone who likes food science. And what I also like about the beer making process is that it sounds like it's like there's a lot of feedback when it comes to beer. So what I mean by that is if it tastes bad, you're gonna know that it tastes bad, and if you did something wrong. So yeah, I like that constant feedback that's happening. But one of the other things that I did want to talk to you about is that you're still kind of in the world of academia because you are an assistant professor at Niagara College. So tell me a little bit more about that and tell me about the brewing program.
So when I was studying, one of my professors, Nate Ferguson, he's part of the owners of Escarment Labs. They develop new yeast strains. We get into rabbit holes when we were in class because we start talking about this, and then I ask questions that are deeper than science that we are covering. And then it was really interesting how he developed his class. And one day he just called me like, dude, you want to cover me for this half part of the summer? I was like, yeah, sure. I love to teach. I used to teach back in my country, and I really like that class. So that's how I get into teaching and into the program. And since then, I've been doing a part-time job with them. I'm covering brewing science 1, 2, and 3 for short period of time. Right now, I'm covering just brew science 2. That is part of the first exposure for brewers into the lab. So how to measure stuff, how to do their cell counting, how to make dilutions, how to measure gases like CO2 and dissolve oxygen in your product, how to do forcing tests, so how to measure those flavors that you don't want, how try to understand all that and how the yeast is behaving, the grains are behaving, and all the chemistry behind that. Um, and it's a good experience as well because at first I was really nervous to teach in English. I had never been teaching in English, so that was a new experience. But I think I love to talk. I love to teach, and I love to share information with people. Back in my country, I found a friend from Venezuela that is a chemist as well, and he was starting a network for like doing talks, like outreach, so science talks for regular people in breweries, in bars, and I went into it, uh, and we had amazing time with them. Now this guy is doing his postdoc in Spain and working with one big company. So we keep in touch, but I would love to go back and do some science talks in bars and just share with people interesting stuff. And now that I have 2 kids, it's amazing how they are keep asking questions, and I always encourage them to keep asking because pretty much scientists are just children that has too much years in this world.
Well, I can tell that you're really passionate about just how you've been sharing and even just how you explained the beer making process earlier in this conversation. It definitely made it a lot more clear for me, and but unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our conversation. And again, I've learned a lot when it comes to the beer making process. But again, I always like to ask my guests before they leave and they come on my show about pieces of advice. Like, I know you've probably already told this to your students that are in your program, but my question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone who's considering going into brewing or becoming a brewer?
I mean, honestly, you can have whatever background. One of my friends in my program, in my class, she's an actress and is an amazing brewer. Some people is coming from like any field. Like I, one of my friends was a mechanic, and he gets tired of being a mechanic and turns into brewer. So there's no excuse to become a brewer. However, um, you need to be committed to learn hard stuff. So if your background is not related with science, you need to make that extra mile to learn that thing. And then it's just be imaginative. Try to use what you are learning to make your own signature when you are brewing. Um, and just try to become passionate. If you are not passionate, and that's applied for any field. If you are not passionate what you are doing, it's really hard to work day by day. Brewing is a physical work still. You can have help from machines, but it still is a physical job. So, and you will be in a hot environment. It's not easy during summer, and during winter, your if your brewery doesn't have like good climate condition, it will be cold. So you need to deal with the elements too. But it's rewarding. It's like when you see the grains, and then when you see your beer in a glass, and it's just enjoyment of people drinking your beer or tasting your beer and giving you feedback. It just pushes you to try different stuff. Like right now, we did one trial with my former um, friends at those. Um, that was like I had that idea on mind. Like I want to mix tamarind and chipotle into a beer. I didn't have a clue how to do it. And then the opportunity came. It was like a beer that went sideways and put so much of a dark malt. So it was tasting really astringent and not good. So, oh, I can add tamarind syrup to balance that astringency. And let's add some spiciness. But what I want to give to that beer that was a dark beer is just a hint of those that smokiness from the chili. So chipotle usually is a jalapeno that has been dry and smoked, and I want to give a little bit of that and a little bit of spice. So the idea turned into a good beer, and it was just a small batch. And that beer is not for drink a whole pint. I won't drink a whole pint, but it's more like a delicacy beer. It's like your dessert, or if you are eating with something that is greasy and you want to give an extra layer of flavor, that is a perfect pairing. So beer is not just to drink and chug a full pint. Sometimes it's just to enjoy and talk. You have high ABV beers that need to be consumed slow and steady with a good talk, with a good friend, and that's it. There's a bunch of recipes that involves different ingredients, and you can have different beers all year long. It's not just summer. I need something to crush my thirst, and that's it. You can have beers like it, the sky is the limit.
Well, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Santiago, for coming on the show, telling me about what you do, telling me about the world of beer. I think that it just is a great place to work, and it sounds like there's a lot of exciting things that are happening for you. So I'm happy that I'm able to share this conversation. And again, thanks for coming on the show.